part 2 of Land Legacy, Build As We Climb with Jay Bailey, with your host, the IZZ.
And I'm Mariposa.
So you always told me this. Get your 30-minute pitch together. 30-minute. Get your 30-minute podcast together.
Come on.
Get your 30-second pitch together.
Mm-hmm.
So in 60 seconds, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, take a minute and a half if you need to. Tell the people who you are and what you want to be known for before we get into these questions.
Oh, bro, it's a tough question for me, man.
I finally came with one. But give us that authentic swing.
But it's real, bro. I mean, I start every day at zero. Like, none of the accolades, none of that extra stuff really means much to us as long as my people are hurting, you know? I always see myself as that kid from the deck. I always see myself as there's so much more to do, and I've seen so many of us that get so caught up in the recognition of things that we lose ourselves, brother, and we lose the vision. So, I try to keep it as authentic and as 100 and as grounded as I possibly can whenever I can, and certainly check myself when I don't. For those of us that have the capacity or the ability to go long, it's incumbent upon us to take this thing as far as we can possibly take it. Because there are people whose whole lives depend on us going as long as we can. And I've been blessed. There's certainly been favor shown. How dare I go short? How dare I stop short of what's possible? So I'm always going to try to push the needle. I'm always going to try to push the envelope. I'm always going to try to do things differently. If you go in my office, WTFN is on the wall. And it's my personal slogan, why the F not? And that's always my question. Why can't we? Why shouldn't we? Why wouldn't we? My whole life right at this point, I'd like to be known for WTFN. Always asking that question, always pushing the envelope.
So can we talk about one of the big elephants in the room in Atlanta, which is about the wealth gap or income inequality? There's different phrases.
Yeah.
This is the worst in the country. What are your thoughts on that?
It's my soapbox. It's the whole thing that I talk about. It's in the Black Mecca. Remember that cost of perception killing our community?
Yeah.
We love the narrative. Oh, Atlanta, we run it, Black Mecca. But Atlanta leads the country in income inequality. We're the worst city in America. We're the worst city in the country when it comes to income immobility. Child born into poverty in Atlanta has less than a 4% chance of reaching the middle class. We should be all ashamed of that. But the real story is we're 54% of the population. Ain't no poor white neighborhoods in Atlanta. There are no failing Latino schools in the Atlanta public school system. There are no Asian ghettos in Atlanta. Almost 100% of that poverty we're talking about looks like you and I. And so if we're going to create strategies to build our economy that aren't intentionally focused on Black people, then what's the point? We're being intellectually disingenuous in our approach to move the needle. And back to that notion of perception, to overcompensate for my lack, I want to do everything in my power to show you or to present this persona that everything is okay. And I have certainly been there, so it's not a condemnation on people, but I drove the cars and bought the houses to hide an inner depression that was going on. But that's what we've been taught, and that's what we've seen. Everybody's pulled up to a family reunion, the cousin pull up with a brand new car, and everybody's like, oh, and you want that. When a mom doesn't have the ability to buy anything new for her son 364 days out of the year, but on tax day, she gets about 4, 5, 7,000. And you expect her to think financial literacy when her entire year that she's not been able to buy anything for her son. Every time he asks, he has to say, no, we can't afford it. And there's one time I get to make a decision where I can say yes. We got some real deep set issues around poverty and what poverty means. And we've got to do better as a community. But the first step to doing better is owning that we ain't okay. And I think we just like the lie. I think we like the lie that we have this proximity to power and this perception of wealth. And I don't really want to get into the down and dirty that exposes our truth. But I love Atlanta enough to be honest with her and to say that, guys, as much as we want to say that this is it, it ain't.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And that's the real story, right? Mm-hmm. That's the eye-opening story, because you see that income inequality everywhere.
You know, I
It's
joke
everywhere.
with the Russells, and even if they're listening, of the rich people, y'all are poor. And they're the wealthiest Black family in the Southeast, probably. And if we made a list of the 50 wealthiest people in the city of Atlanta or the 50 wealthiest families, they wouldn't even show. There wouldn't be a single Black person on this list. I joked with a friend of mine the other day, the wealthiest family in Atlanta is probably the Cox family. They're worth $41.8 billion collectively.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you know what? If we took every Black person in Atlanta, Russells, T.I., Tyler Perry, everybody, every Range Rover, every big house, every Louis Vuitton bag, every red bottom shoe, whatever, put everything we own as a people in one pile, added it all together, that one family could cut a check, buy out our entire community and still be wealthy. Buy everything out. Everything that we own in the city, buy it all out, still be wealthy.
And that's the difference between generational wealth and being shut out of that by systemic racism and other systems designed to keep us behind.
And we don't have a whole lot of examples of generational wealth. Bet somebody some money the other day because it hit me like a ton of bricks. I like the show Billions that comes on Showtime. Hit me the second season that in my lifetime, and I'm 44, I have never seen a main character depicted in a movie, a film, a television program, cartoon that was a Black boss, like billionaire level, wealthy business person calling shots. Never seen it in my entire life. And I've been betting people $20. I still got a 20 in my pocket to tell me to prove me wrong. You can't aspire to what you've never been inspired by. And so this surface level of, if I got the nicer house and the nicer car, we plateau because that is the pinnacle of what success looks like. If I got the Benz and the bigger house, that's pretty much where I want to stay. Got a good insurance policy, a 401k. And because of what I've seen, it's hard for me to think about that next level.
Right.
But trust and believe there is a next level.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. I'm still wrapping my head around that. But I have a three-part question.
Sure.
And actually it's the same question. It's just changing the numbers. You know,
Okay.
I'm a math guy. I like the numbers. So you're talking to our listeners, right? And you have three things. I want you to think of three things that every American making, let's start off with $25,000 as a household
Ooh.
should be doing to generate a legacy of wealth.
Wow. Make it under 25K?
Making under 25K.
Hard to make decisions under 25K. When I talked about that single mother, you know, I always think about when you talked about the gig economy, when you talked about harnessing talents that you have, I'm just a firm believer inherently we all have something. We may have that 9 to 5, but there's a 5 to 9 that we can construct using our talents, our gifts, our skills, our physical labor, our mental. And with a direct-to-consumer marketplace, you know, there are opportunities for us to actually find some other way. It's hard for me to put any kind of judgment on a mom making less than $25,000 a year because that is hell on earth trying to make decisions where the economy is right now. But I think that there are ways that we can think creatively about how we can bring extra gig economy, sideline income in. But as much as you can afford it, you know, I also look at insurance as a quantum leap. Even if it's affordable insurance and it may not be whole life, but it may be something that you could bring into the space that you could afford. I mean, it's tough. And sometimes, you know, I think that people start to judge the decisions of somebody making 25 grand, but from a guy that was homeless at one point, you ain't thinking about responsible living when you're just surviving. You're not thinking about what's my strategy when I'm making 25 grand a year and I got 2 kids at home. So it's tough, Chuck. I mean, Chiz or Izzo. What is it? The IZZ. The IZZ. My bad.
We love our producer.
No
Okay.
doubt. The IZZ.
He can keep that all in there
Yeah.
because Chiz, it started with Chiz. The IZZ started with
the
Chiz.
IZZ. So, you know, I think that it's hard for me to say anything but survive at that.
What about 50,000? Same question.
Now we got a few options. Now we can start talking about a side hustle. Now we can start talking about leveraged in business. Now we can start thinking about budgeting at 50K. Now we can start thinking about insurance and looking at, you know, leaving 100,000, 150,000, 200,000 to somebody below, but you're paying what equates to a couple of meals per month to put that in place to think generationally. At 50,000, you at least get to breathe. You still ain't sweet. You're still struggling to make ends meet at 50K, but you do have some options. I'm just a firm believer in everybody using the gifts they have to do something with it. $50K, I want you to own your own property. Stop renting. I'm a big guy into ownership. And, for whatever you're paying in rent at $50K, I bet you could buy a house for that. Look at ways where that house can make you money. Let's not look at the traditional ways of buying a house really equates wealth, because we could have a whole other podcast about our perception of having a house as our greatest asset versus what a house really is. That's a whole other conversation. That's a lie that we've been told around equity. But you could invest in a duplex where you live on one side and the other side is income producing. Again, it's just that ownership narrative. You need to start shifting to an ownership model at $50,000 a year. You have the capacity to make a few different decisions at that point, for sure.
Okay. And let's double it to 100,000. That's probably a better spot. That's a spot where we see a lot of Atlantans or people that transplant to Atlanta.
Yeah.
They might be in that or getting close to that 100,000. Let's go with 100,000.
Make money in your sleep. Looking at asset generating things that you own. If it's real estate, if it's investments, you have to look at what I call lazy capital, lazy money, where you make money in your sleep by having it, by owning it. There's interest involved. You have the opportunity to live in a lesser house, but have now 3 houses and 2 of them making your money to pay for that first house. Yeah, I think at 100,000, we start to pool resources and actually start funding companies. You just have a lot of options when you hit that $100,000 mark, that if you don't fall into the trap, the Mayor Barney Poster was talking about earlier about, I want you to know that I make 100,000. And the only way that I can let you know when I'm driving down the street that I make 100,000 is the car, the clothes, and everything else that I wear, because I want you to show you that I make 100,000. We could break that culture, bro. There's some resources there that we could galvanize and weaponize in our community to change our community.
That's a hard one to break.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, you asking me for utopia, but if we could get there and start that culture, but I also believe in popular culture. I started drinking 40 ounces because NWA started talking about them. When you were in Decatur, if somebody started rolling up their right leg, all of a sudden, sooner or later, everybody started rolling up that right leg. It becomes culture. And so if we started a culture of ownership, responsibility to our community, seeing value in our own reflection, because right now, guaranteed, the only value add proposition for success in our community is how far I can move away from it. We're the only people to do that. Part of what happened in Southwest Atlanta, part of what happened in Stone Mountain and Churchill Downs and Hidden Hills and all those areas, when that VP had the salary to move into Hidden Hills. When they became an executive vice president, Hidden Hills wasn't good enough. So they got to move to Buckhead or Alpharetta or Johns Creek or whatever else to show their position in life. Versus every other community just reinvest in their community. If I'm wealthy and I'm Jewish and I'm in Sandy Springs and I got the best house I could afford in this neighborhood, if I make more money, I just go buy a nicer house in that neighborhood. They see value in their own reflection. They reinvest in community. We got to do the same.
Or I buy land and then I build my dream house on that land.
Bro,
in that same.
Going back to her story about Herman Russell, at one point in Atlanta, Georgia, the mayor ordered that there be a wall constructed to keep black folks out of north of Peyton Road. Mr. Russell and 6 other families bought a cattle farm and built Collier Heights. So black people, business leaders, middle-class black folks would have a dignified place to live. Your mayor came from Collier Heights. Killer Mike came from Collier Heights. That house that you visited with the pool and the tennis court was bought by black people, designed by black people, built by black people, for black people. That's the model. We already had the script. We just forgot the lines.
Yeah, it reminds me of the talented 10th theory. They always say, hey, that talented 10th forgot about the other 90%. They took their talent and went wherever they went. And
they went.
You know, that's definitely another episode because we could debate some of those theories as well. So, well, I mean, I love what the RCIE is doing and how you're reaching out and you're touching people. And so what's the best way for people to plug into that? Should they come in and do a consultation, present their business proposal? What is the best way?
First step is just to go online, rcie.org, and join our mailing list. In the COVID environment where everything's virtual, we're still learning. We're still a small business. We're a startup, if you will. Joining our mailing list, you'll get access to whatever training, whatever program we're doing for the community. But as we start to build these new cohorts of businesses that are coming into our curriculum, then that's where you'll get the first knowledge of that. But following us on social media, certainly LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook is a way that you can stay plugged in and connected. But just know that everything that you've heard or seen thus far is literally just the very tip of where we're going. The vision that we have for this place, we haven't even begun to unleash what we're going to do with this place. We've just been blessed even on the earliest stages of this. Mind you, I got hired about 2 years ago. So this was a gutted out building 2 years ago with no programming, no planning. So to go from 2 years ago to us recording a podcast in the building, you know, we've been at a rocket pace. And this is when I talked about starting every day at zero. We're at zero compared to where we're going. So follow us, rcie.org. Make sure you join our mailing list.
Shout out to Legacy Podcast Studio inside RCI.
My man.
You know I'm going to do it. So we're talking about the Russells. You mentioned Andy Young.
Sure.
Andrew Young, Ambassador Young, former Mayor Young, all of the accolades of that. But I know that you've had the pleasure of shaking hands, breaking bread with some of the most influential people don't know, and some of the most influential people that people do know. And with 2020, we've had some loss.
My man.
In the area of human capital.
Sure.
So if you can, you've broken bread and had intimate conversations with Dr. Joseph Lowery, Congressman John Lewis, and the effervescent 95-year-old Dr. C.T. Vivian. I'm
still not handling that in 1 year we've lost Lowery, Vivian, and Lewis. To lose Vivian and Lewis within 24 hours in the middle of some of the most divisive and violent civil unrest and separate. Like this is a tough year for Black people. C.T. Vivian, of all the civil rights icons that I've been able to kind of sit at the feet of, I never really got a chance to sit down with Hosea, but I grew up around Hosea.
Yeah, he made himself accessible.
No
to
doubt.
us.
And so, you know, shaking his hand at Piccadilly at South DeKalb, but never really old enough to really take in Hosea Williams. So I missed that opportunity because he was always a favorite of mine.
Yeah.
C.T. Vivian was kind of like my guide, right? The one that I admired the most. His approach to life, the way that he looked at things. But I tell you, one of the greatest things that he shared with me, one day he was in my office, actually. You know, I was like, Dr. Vivian, man, y'all young boys changed the world without firing a single shot. Tell me, how'd y'all do it? And he said, Doctor, all the power is in the doing, period. I said, no, for real, how did y'all, give me more than that? He said, there's no more than that. While everybody else was talking about change and wanting how much they wanted to see change, we were some kids, man. You got to think in that iconic video where he gets hit in the mouth by Bull Connor. Mm-hmm. Vivian was 40 years old at the time. John Lewis was 25. They were some kids, didn't know what they were doing, but they were actually out there doing. While everybody else was talking, they were doing. All the power is in the action. He shared that with me. It's been inspirational to me around that WTFN. Let's not talk about it. Let's just go do it. Maybe it ain't going to be perfect, but I'm a firm believer you never let perfect stop progress. If you want to do a podcast, maybe you don't have it all together, but get on a microphone and record something. If you don't have a podcast studio, get a cassette recorder if you can't afford, some digital equipment. But get started. And I think that I got that from Ambassador Young. I got that from Congressman Lewis. I got that from certainly C.T. Vivian, that it's about the doing. Why are we still sitting around and talking about it? Even Ambassador Young, he chastised me one time even about marriage. Came into my office and cursed me out about this girl that I was dating. What are you doing? What is the purpose of this continuing to date? Is she not a woman that you can build with? What are you waiting on? That action, that doing, that taking definitive action about things, I'll take that from them forever, but there's a hole in the universe with them gone. And there's a void of leadership with them gone because for far too long, we took them for granted. We've leaned on their legacy. They've always been here. They walked like giants among us, and we've taken it for granted. You can see them at the grocery store, at a gala, at a movie theater, or at a gas station. You would be walking amongst giants. But now that they're gone, a whole lot of us, I don't think there's a singular leader approach, but a whole lot of us are going to have to grow up real quickly. We're going to have to get real uncomfortable. And
are we going to do it?
That's the thing. And if we don't, the consequences I can't even calculate. And that's the question. because for so long we've been coddled, if you will. We haven't been forced into action. We've been eagles, but we've not been kicked out of the nest and made to fly. And I think we're getting close to that point, Izzo. We're getting close to that point. Things are so tenuous and so tension-filled in the world right now that leaders are going to have to emerge. And some of them may not be ready to jump, but they're about to get kicked out of the plane, and they're just going to figure it out.
So what about the, I guess you can say, accusation that the leaders of that era failed to train enough people to follow in their footsteps? And so, as you just said, it's not a singular leader approach. We're beyond that. But there does seem to be an abyss between those giants and folks that can galvanize today. And I think there's a lot of younger people that have energy, but they don't necessarily have the same level of direction.
I think there was a generation of selfishness that occurred right after him. And I'll stand on that, and I like to debate and argue it. But in a time where segregation was squarely in place, y'all don't want us living north of Peyton Road? Fine, we build our own neighborhood. Our schools, Mays and Douglas, will be top-notch, and they'll be named after people that look like us. And our kids are not going to go to schools across town in seeking a better education. We're going to make sure the smartest of our kids are right here in our community. So when you went to Mays or Doug or Therrell or wherever you went where'd you go?
Mays.
As you went to Mays.
Please,
Mays.
get it right.
But even the way she said it, holding pride, and it was the same for Southwest DeKalb, where the whole community rallied behind the school. It was enough. And so when we broke out into this strategy of individualism that broke with this whole community focus of the C.T. Vivians, of the H.J. Russells and the Martin Luther Kings, community focus action. Because I guarantee whatever church you went to wasn't too far from Southwest Atlanta. Whatever church you went to, Chiz, wasn't too far from Decatur. But now when we start looking at this disparate model where it's how far can I go away? You know, how much different can I be from you? How can I be so separated from you? We lost this community where our strength was, and it was about me making sure you understand I had more education or more money, a better car. And there was this thing between us. As, you know, an Omega and an AKA at the table, I heard once from Ambassador Andrew Young, he was like, Bailey, I don't think I ever gave Dr. King the grip more than twice. They were both alpha men. But he said, we never thought that Black people needed just another reason to separate themselves or be different from one another. And we never wanted to show that we got this thing and you don't. So they never really showed alpha or the grip because of this community feel, this unity feel, that I wanted to have less things that separated me from you and let it be about us. I think our fathers and our mothers went through a generation of when their parents couldn't, they were the first generation of open opportunity. And so they had this mentality to go as far and as fast as I can on my own, be this island, go long. And it never cycled back to community. So it birthed our generation that then didn't have that same community feel. Think about your families and family reunions. I fear for my family 2 generations from now. When everybody grew up around each other, family reunions were off the chain. They survived generationally because they had great grandmothers that brought the family together. But now you move 2 generations. How often do you talk to your cousins or get together with your family? Another 2 generations where those matriarchs and those patriarchs start to die off. We're so spread out when before our greatest strength was with proximity and how close we were. That was the magic of Southwest Atlanta as well. That was the magic of Decatur, South DeKalb County. It was literally because all of us were 2 degrees, 2 parks degrees separation. You played at Gresham Park, you played at Midway, played at Glenwood Hills. You went to this school or that school, but I know my cousin, he goes there with you. And there was this community that was based on proximity. I didn't go to Lenox Mall until my senior year in high school because this girl wanted to buy some shoes. And I'm like, how'd I get to Lenox Mall? My prom day. I'd never been to Lenox Mall because South DeKalb was enough. We had North DeKalb.
You'll find it all
at South DeKalb Mall. I mean, you would though, right?
Everything.
Memorial Drive, Candler Road. People don't understand Columbia Drive. All these streets were thriving back in the day. From toy stores to bicycle shops to record shops.
Lionel Playworld.
Lionel Playworld turned the smile upside down. Like, what did you need outside of your community? And in that place, you developed a tremendous pride for Decatur. And we were more of the middle class, while Southwest Atlanta was kind of the upper middle class and beyond. But we had this really strong middle class connection to one another. And the same thing occurred in Southwest Atlanta. The byproduct of that is, in the last mayoral election, you got 8 candidates vying for mayor, all from the same neighborhood.
Speak that.
That's the direct byproduct of a community producing, but now.
And almost lost it.
But we lost that community feel, because back in the day, maybe somebody would say, hey, Izzo, it's your turn. I need you to stay at this position. I need you to run for this. We're going back here for that. We're going to see that, because we need to develop this Black power class that I don't think we have anymore, where there were some forefathers and foremothers who used to get in the room and they could make things happen. Right now, I think it's hard to do that because of that fierce individualism, because how are you going to tell me what I need to do? That wasn't the way we always were. We always looked at the community and what was best for the community to move forward. Now it's more about what's best for me and mine's.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more individuality.
Oh,
for sure.
absolutely.
Versus people following one of 3 or 4 different mantras. I mean, we were never a monolith, right? People think that, but from Marcus Garvey to Dr. Du Bois, they all talked about different things. And so some people ascribe to different philosophies. But I mean, I guess the other part of that is, so in terms of next steps, because we have listeners that are beyond Georgia. We have listeners that are actually all over the world.
India.
I love it.
We have some people from India.
No doubt. Farsi in the building.
Yeah. So if there is like one concept of RCIE that you could take and apply it globally, like there may be some people who want to just leave Atlanta and try their hand someplace else.
Yeah. I don't know why they would do that. But, I mean, the only universal construct that I believe in is love. I mean, I think that's just it. I think greater humanity wins out over everything. If I can look at you and see value, if I can look at you and see love, I think that's the only universal concept that we have that works everywhere. And the greatest humanity that we can have, it's global. That's the universal language. So I don't know. I don't know if the RCIE model works in Bangladesh. Different culture, different way to climb the ladder. But I know mutual respect, admiration, support, those concepts that are born out of love, certainly they work across the world.
Congratulations again for co-chairing the advisory council for this. I won't say unpermitted. I'll just say these water sales, bottles of water being sold without a permit. That's something that's big in Atlanta. What is your thoughts on that? Or what are your thoughts? Not even if you have the results yet. Just what are your thoughts on that? And then I want to give you the minute and a half, 2 minutes to just wrap it up so we can go home.
We have to harness the entrepreneurial spirit. Right now, what they're doing is unsafe. It's illegal, technically. People have gotten hurt. People have gotten killed. But I do not want to kill the entrepreneurial spirit that lives in these young men that are on the corner. There was a young man who started his first business selling Cokes out of a wagon. That's how he started his business, unpermitted. That guy was Truett Cathy, and he started Chick-fil-A. There was a man that illegally had an illegal shoe shine stand, and he also sold Cokes illegally from the side of the road. That man was Herman Russell. There is the opportunity, and people will say, well, that's different because they didn't leave a mess. They weren't harming people. That's because they had parents and they had family to make sure that they had a moral code and they were doing it the right way. I think that we should give these kids the very same because they have just simply gotten it out of the mud. And people don't get how large an industry this is. We did the math. If we're just talking about Atlanta, you're talking about 75 to 80 corners in Atlanta where kids are selling water. These kids are making anywhere from $75 to $300 a day. You're talking about a $15, $20, $30, $40 million cottage industry created out of the mud with no support system. They understood and unpacked the whole supply chain and delivered a product that's making millions of dollars, where you got PhDs from Harvard that are still trying to break the $1 million revenue annually. And you got some boys in the hood that are on the corners and are literally generating $30 to $40 million every year.
I got a plan for that, though.
But that's what I mean. And it's literally, if you look at a plan, these boys deserve at least a shot at giving them the opportunity to do it in a more efficient way, to give them options. How, we lose a piece of the soul of our city if we let all of that energy die or end up locking young Black boys up for just trying to do more without giving our best effort to giving them options at different ways forward. Shame on us if we allow that to happen.
2 minutes, Jay Bailey. Take us home.
Freestyle. One of my personal mantras is plant seeds that will grow trees whose shade you will never sit under. It's time for us as a people to again start seeing value in our own reflection. It's time to come home. It's time, if you and your wife have the ability to buy grandmama's house before somebody else buys it, come home. It's time to look at a time where, yes, Mays and Doug and Columbia and Southwest DeKalb are the schools of choice in our communities. It's time for us to look at building wealth in our communities through real estate because, yes, let our properties in our communities appreciate at a rate again where we actually can leave something behind. I think we're at a great inflection point right now. And when you start to think about everything going on in the world right now, if it's never been apparent to us more than right now for this generation, because I agree there's a shift that's occurred. But if this generation has ever had to face that we are going to have to do some things differently, we're going to have to come back together as a community. Because for a long while, we could hide and anonymously and kind of, not integrate, but assimilate within communities. The way the world is polarized now, ain't no more hiding. And there has to be this coming together again where we need each other, we build up with each other, we collaborate with each other, we strengthen one another, we encourage one another. Because more than ever, we got us. And I don't know if there's anybody else out there that got us. And I think it's more apparent now than it has been in the past 50 years. And the only way we get out of this is through community. And we're going to have to get through this, making sure that we build community, sustain community, grow community, love community for us, by us, and taking a stand to say, what do you own? What do you control? Again, go find grandmama's house. Don't let somebody else take grandmama's house. And I think that statement alone actually spreads out into many other ways. But at a core concept, we got to build our own because ain't nobody else. Superman ain't coming.
Yeah, I think that's key because particularly the piece about the community, if you think about a lot of the relationships that were forged, as you alluded to earlier, you develop those in college. Well, if you're not going to college, then who's your community? How are you forging relationships that will help leverage your future?
And it's based on a construct of I can make a lot of money, right? I ain't got to go to college. I can start a business and make a lot of money. Stevie Wonder didn't get into music because he wanted to make a lot of money. It used to be people loved to heal people, so they became doctors. They care for other people. People wanted to fight for justice or what was right, so they became lawyers. And all of a sudden, we got into this era where it's about how much I can make versus how much I can be. And I think for me, I had that great epiphany where I went from being a young millionaire to being homeless. By the world standards, I had been successful, but I had zero significance. I had done nothing to put a dent in this world. And I think that value of community that must be taught in many ways, we've lost a lot of that. And so like you said, I don't need to meet you. I don't need to make friends with you. I don't need to pledge no fraternity. I don't need to go to college. I don't need to be a part of a group. I don't need to live in community. I can live off by myself. As long as my house is bigger and my car is nicer, you'll envy me. That ain't us. That is just not us. It's never been us and it never should be us. We got to come back to what works for us, and that's community.
The 30-minute podcast.
They took 3 hours. 30-minute podcast.
Thank you so much for joining us.
No, I love it, man. We could talk forever. I love it.
Thank you for joining us. The one and only, not even incomparable, the one and only, only one in the world. I know jaybailey.com.
My man.
Thank you, Jay Bailey, President and CEO of RCIE, Russell Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. It is I, the IZZ.
Mariposa. Until next time.
Peace and love, family.